All right, folks, we are back, and yes, my voice is finally somewhat coherent after an 18-hour live stream. I want to thank everybody that came by. We basically did 2 million views on that stream, got past 300K. I have the best community in the world, and it's all thanks to you guys. We keep growing, and as I always say, we're just getting started. Speaking of getting started, I'm not going to waste any time with any kind of crazy intros today because we have to talk about Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury and why, especially in the influencer scene, Jake Paul losing isn't as bad as you think, but there's a reason why he did. Multiple reasons. And there were some technical mistakes and things that Jake actually could have done to win this fight that can be fixed, but we're 5 years into this, and the question that I have, and one we're going to break down today, will they be fixed? Why did Jake Paul lose to Tommy Fury? It's pretty simple, but the breakdown, let's go. So first off, let's get something out of the way right away. Jake Paul did lose this fight. I don't think it was robbery. I don't think the split decision was even warranted. I thought Tommy Fury won this fight pretty convincingly. Now, does that mean that Tommy Fury blew Jake out of the water and it wasn't competitive at all? No, parts of this were competitive, and there were opportunities for Jake to win this fight. And in fact, for everybody that I know is going to write this aged badly or this aged like Ben Askren's gelatinous bag of milk body, I want you guys to go back and watch exactly what I said in my prediction video, and that was exactly how the fight played out. Tommy Fury was very aggressive on the front foot early. He was jab heavy, and that jab bothered Jake. Tommy convincingly won 4 out of the first 5 rounds, but started to slow down. Jake had opportunities with the right hand that he actually landed. Tommy took the shots better than I imagined he would, and in the later rounds, Tommy handled the big stage and the big moment better than I thought he would, but it still did technically drop Tommy with the jab. I didn't expect that. More so that Jake would find an opening and land a big one, then overwhelm him. That didn't happen, and it's really the only thing I said that didn't happen, because I knew, just like a lot of us did, that Tommy would be the better boxer. I knew that Tommy would have more volume. I knew that Tommy would get up on the scorecards early. It was a matter of can he maintain it, and if Jake is ever going to land that big one. He needed to, and he just didn't. But as the fight started, listen, the game plan was from Tommy, like we talked about, volume on the jab, push Jake back, and then look for the opening with the right hand, rinse and repeat. It was a very simple game plan. A lot of feints, a lot of jabs, and then behind that, combinations. And while it is simple, if you're a guy like Jake who's never seen that, it is a bit complicated to maneuver, especially when on Jake's side of things, it looked a lot more like catch and shoot, right? It was a lot of flat-footed, standing there, jutting the chin out, like daring Tommy to throw his jab to be able to slip outside, slip inside, pop a jab of his own, or a hook, or a right hand. But that is another problem that we're going to get into. Jake was throwing single shots, sometimes pot-shotting Tommy, who was throwing 5 to 6 punches back his way, and immediately he got behind the 8 ball. And this is why I talk about the 5 years that Jake has been boxing, because at this point, the adjustment would be to start doubling up your jab, to set up the right hand. And it's shocking that he didn't have to, because Tommy kept running right into the right hand. Like, it was there for the taking. Jake threw it and landed it early. I think even in the first round, Jake lands a big overhand right, and Tommy just eats it. And again, Jake has been putting people down with that right hand, but those people didn't have the youthful exuberance and or the ability to take the shot like Tommy did, and that's not a strength of Tommy's. He definitely has to work on continuously circling to his left, which again was something that Jake and their team wanted, and Jake landed the shot. It just didn't come together the way Jake wanted. The power didn't translate in the way Jake wanted. And I don't think he landed it as cleanly because of some of the wasted movement and the stuff that we still see Jake struggling with from all the way back in the Tyron Woodley 1 fight and the Ben Askren fight, and the way he throws that overhand. It's a lot of wasted movement, a lot of over-the-top swing looping shots that if those are tightened up a bit and they are set up with a jab and a double jab and not just the jab to the body right hand, the same progressive pattern over and over, would be a lot more successful and potentially would land a lot more accurately, which is a big problem here. Not Jake's power, not even Tommy's power. The accuracy at which they both landed, Tommy was more accurate more often. In fact, in almost every single round, Tommy doubles up Jake, not only with the volume, but also with the accuracy. A huge problem if you're Jake is you're already not a high volume puncher. You have to be accurate, and he just wasn't here. It's the same game over and over. Jake being reactive off the jab, not being able to produce offense because he's out of rhythm and standing flat-footed, just relying on his head movement, catching and throwing, which just wasn't enough. And it's something we're going to dive into deeper. He's a great athlete, but it feels like he's gotten away with being just a good athlete and relying on the things that got him to the dance and not necessarily preparing for what happens if those things aren't effective. And as round 2 started, another thing I thought that both guys struggled with was the clinch. I felt like both guys didn't really do themselves any favors by clinching continuously, because either or was clinching as they were attacking, where the openings were there. to throw shots in the pocket. It was more so Jake throwing his jab and then trying to work his way into range, but just kind of getting too close to operate and kind of falling in, clinching. Same thing with Tommy. He would double, triple up his jab, but the right hand had no room to operate, something we've said before with Tommy he really struggles with because he'd crowd himself and eventually would just fall into the clinch. But like I said, in round 2, it showed again, Jake was meant to be in there with Tommy. Like, he was overmatched as a boxer, but again, his athleticism carried him to be able to still have this be somewhat competitive, because in this second round, and we see this as, again, a reoccurring theme, Tommy is successful. He's volume heavy. He's having a lot of success with his jab, but Jake is starting to time it. And again, he's slipping outside and trying to throw the right hand over. And again, he lands a big one, but it's not thrown technically with the same amount of zing as a pull right hand would be from a technically gifted boxer that has worked diligently on what happens if a scenario, double jab comes in, I parry both, or I slip and roll. How then to throw the correct punch and then follow up. It seemed like Jake is still not grasping that aspect. Jake has become a fighter by continuously hard sparring, continuously relying on those big time right hands and sticking his jab and his athletic head movement, his ability really to take shots, because his noggin is the size of some fucking planetary constellation. He's able to take punches, but the basics of boxing aren't allowing him to get to the next level. It really is a question we have to ask. Not that Jake is at his peak, but why there isn't more development to get him to the next level. I don't know who's to blame for that, because you can tell Jake really wants to be a good boxer, but as of right now, he's not that. He can fight, he is a fighter, but as a boxer, he is still a novice. But round 3 came and Jake had a little bit more in the tank, but again, it was kind of the same story where Jake would have success in one-shot combinations where he would slip outside, bang the lead hook, and it would catch Tommy flush. There wouldn't be the follow-up behind that. There wouldn't be the setup with the double jab and then look to land one of your better shots behind that, or any of the things that you would want to see as far as what Jake's progression looked like, the patience coming forward, a little bit lighter on the feet, a little bit more flowy and zippy in his movements. It wasn't there. He looked a lot more flat. And then we have to talk about what happened between round 3 and round 4. Radio Raheem interviewed Logan Paul sitting ringside, and they gave him a hot mic, meaning usually you'll hear interviews on the broadcast just go to the people watching on the pay-per-view, the live stream, whatever. This mic went to the crowd, and Logan Paul, in one of the dumbest and most selfish moves I think I've ever seen from an individual whose brother is fighting in the biggest fight of their lives, decided to make the moment about himself and call Tommy Fury a pussy, and that he was gassing, and everyone heard it, including Tommy Fury and his team. Tried to play some mind games with Tommy. It fucking absolutely backfired, because in round 4, it was probably the most dominant round for Tommy. He came out like a fucking fireball. Jake didn't land one jab this round. Tommy tripled him up with landing and output, and Logan Paul basically served his brother up to a remotivated Tommy in the 4th round. So yeah, Jake gets dominated in round 4, and again, you see the massive holes in something that we haven't really talked about, his defense, right? Where Jake continues to show the same defensive tendencies, which are high guard and back pedal. Not the high guard, chin down, stay in my stance, catch shots, and then circle out. Either flat-footed in range here or backpedaling squared off. Those positions aren't something Jake always had, at least not that I can remember. I mean, granted, Tommy Fury is not Gib back in 2019. That's not the same person that Jake is fighting, but Jake handled pressure a lot better back then, right? He was sliding around. He was eyes on the target. Even while defensive, he was seeing shots come in, and he was able to move and get out of the way and even fire back and throw things off his back foot. It seems like there's a disconnect there, and I don't know why that is. And also, round 5 is the round where Jake Paul gets the point deduction for punching Tommy in the back of the head. I thought this was ludicrous. I didn't see Jake punching Tommy deliberately in the back of the head over and over. I didn't see it. What I assumed the referee was talking about was in the clinch, Jake was throwing short little hammer fists to the side of the head. And sure, if he was warned about that multiple times and didn't listen, then I would say, okay, you take the point. But as he takes that point, the combination or the sequence that allows him to do that, Tommy Fury does the same thing to Jake in the same moment. He does it to Jake right in front of the referee, and the referee does nothing or says nothing to him. It was a very odd point take. Once again, not a big fan of it. Very much gave me Jack Reese in the Logan Paul KSI 2 vibes, where the referee wants to be the head honcho, main man that's supposed to lay down the law because these 2 young novice boxers don't know what they're doing, so I gotta teach them a lesson. Fuck you. Just referee the fight the way it's supposed to. You wouldn't have done that shit to Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder. And like I said, rounds 5, 6, 7, and 8 kind of went the way I thought they would, where Tommy slowed down and it very much became a you go, I go fight, where the only difference was Tommy was closing the gap a lot more and he was just throwing a lot more punches, but there was a lot of clinching here. And again, Jake had his opportunities to land shots, but again, you just go back to him relying on the things he knows or the things that got him to the dance that just were not enough. His ability to be athletic has carried him to this point and even helped him stay in the fight early, where Tommy, maybe his inexperience didn't allow him to go and push for that finish, which, by the way, when he got his point taken, I won't say that it was warranted. I don't think it was, but Tommy was being really slick with the double underhooks and then spreading his arms out to look like, I'm not holding. He's holding me. I'm not holding. While he lifts Jake's arms and doesn't allow Jake to pull those arms back. It's a very cheeky, clever move. And then we get to round 8, and by this time, I think I'd only had Jake winning 2 rounds so far in this fight. Tommy had pretty much dominated every other round, and even in the rounds Jake won, except for round 6 where Tommy got his point taken away. You could argue that Tommy had won those rounds too. They were close, but Tommy had dominated most of the other rounds, and it was really Jake was going to have that stoppage that we said he would need to win this fight. And while it wasn't that, Jake did knock Tommy down, and he can hold his head high because, again, for Tommy to be built up as this pro boxer who was going to start Jake inside a couple of rounds, and Jake was going to really see what pro boxing looked like here. He did not see that in this fight. He saw a novice pro level boxer, but one that he was able to hang with, not really be competitive with through the longevity of the fight, but in specific moments in this fight, not only held his own, but got the better of Tommy, and this was one of them with the jab. Yes, Tommy slipped off the jab, but this is an official knockdown because without that jab, Tommy has no reason to slip and fall. It's not the most damaging shot. Tommy wasn't hurt at all. It absolutely is a knockdown, and it's telling that Tommy and Jake reacted the way they did. Tommy, no, it wasn't a knockdown. Jake, not necessarily happy with the fact that he's knocked this man down, but more so, I think, frustrated with the fact that it couldn't be more. But again, I refer back to what I said at the beginning of this video. Jake had moments and just could not capitalize. And by that point, Jake's creativity just was not there. So it was only a couple of punches, and Tommy had not only seen those punches, but had taken those at that point. So it was the law of diminishing returns for Jake. He just could not get over the hump because he could not get started. And I think he even alludes to that, like I said in the post-fight talk, because as we get to the decision, one judge, which I don't know who or why, one judge had this 75-74 Jake. And I understand that in boxing, we have this fallacy in boxing that all judging is the same, all created equal, all judged on one congruent line, when really it's not. Everybody has their subjective opinion of what is happening in a boxing match, and it doesn't seem like even the most professional of judges follow boxing rules to score rounds. It just makes no sense to me that Jake has a 75-74 win in this fight. Now the question is, what does Jake do next? Because in his post-fight interview, which again, I'm not sure why, he said, I'm not going to make any excuses, and then gave the Logan Paul laundry list of excuses. I was sick, my arm was hurt. Those things can all be true, and it probably is to a certain degree. But Jake can't be the one that says that. He can't be. His team can say it. DJ can come out and say, hey, listen, you guys don't understand. This guy had all these different things going on. That's fine. But for Jake, in that moment, in that crowd, right after he lost, to say that, it just reads like sour grapes and a guy that can't take the fact that he has his first loss. And I, again, don't think that's the case with Jake. I just think that sometimes in those moments, you got to just let it sit. You just have to accept that loss. And I just think that Jake shouldn't have gone that route, because the rest of his interview was classy. He was able to say, hey, listen, I lost this fight. It's a loss. I worked my ass off, but it just didn't work out. But the question has to be asked, what's next for Jake? And he and Nikisa both said they're going to look to that rematch. In my opinion, I don't know if that's the right move, because you do have the KSI fight, which, fair play to KSI. He was going nuts. On Twitter, he was laughing at Jake, saying he could beat both Jake and Tommy Fury, which I don't know about just yet. We're going to see what KSI has in May whenever he fights what looks like it's going to be Joe Fournier or Tyron Woodley, or, as a good friend of mine, True Jordy, said, maybe even the guy that just fought Floyd Mayweather and actually didn't look bad at all, Aaron Chalmers, could be a good matchup. And yes, Jake is going to get memed into oblivion. This is the nature of the beast in influencer boxing. But in my opinion, if he truly wants to get better as a boxer, rematch in a short amount of time is not going to allow him to gain that. And if you lose that rematch in somewhat of a similar fashion, or even worse than this one, because let's be honest, you can't lose any better than Jake did in this fight, and the KSI and Jake fight does start to have a little bit more rust and it lacks luster, and people start to get turned off to it. So I think what you do right now, if you are Jake, just my opinion, is you skip the rematch and you go straight for KSI. You reschedule things, you move the venue. I don't care. You're gonna make a shit ton of money. That fight needs to happen next. Those are my thoughts, man. You guys let me know down below. To sum up, I think Jake lost this fight because he was unable to navigate Tommy's jab. Tommy was a little bit more durable than and I think maybe Jake thought. He handled the moment better than and I think maybe Jake thought. Jake hasn't progressed his fundamental in-fight boxing understanding with the lights on and the heat going to be able to either use it as a first line or fall back when the things that got him to the dance, his athleticism, his ability to shoot and throw, his reaction time, his timing, all those things aren't enough. He doesn't have that second wave. I think that was the biggest difference. Tommy showed his experience. He showed his boxing training for years and years that Jake just doesn't have. He showed Jake a level he hasn't seen before. We've seen Jake off a win, and we've seen him improve little by little. We haven't seen him off a loss. I can almost guarantee you right now, off a loss, and truly things that Jake has to sit down with his team and say, we have to work on this. Jake Paul is about to be more dangerous for the next guy. If it's Tommy, we'll see how that looks. But if it's KSI or anybody else, they're going to see a Jake they haven't seen before. But those are my thoughts. You guys let me know down below. What did you think of this fight? Where are Jake's flaws? Where are his mistakes? And where can he get better? And really, truly, what does he do next? I don't have those answers, but Tommy Fury beats Jake Paul quite convincingly, but not as convincingly as you would have thought. Jake Paul shows himself better than I think a lot of people gave him credit for, but still is not the level of a prospect pro boxer. It is the unfortunate truth, but what happens next, I guess we'll find out.